Welcome to Jobbed Out, the wrestling editorial that reminds you that you don't need a giant stadium to make giant memories. The last time I sat down with a buddy for an episode of Who Booked These Guys, Vince McMahon owned a wrestling promotion. I know, feels like only yesterday. But good friend of mine, Michael Vecchio of Ciao Italia Edmonton, brought to my attention that 2024 marks the 20th anniversary of the 20th anniversary of WrestleMania. A show that, even after 2 decades, we both still hold close to our hearts for both good reasons and bad. So we decided to wax nostalgic and discuss our memories of the Mania where it all begins again, and thought it would be cool for you folks to join us. From how the internet was responsible for ruining one of the feature matches to the Chris Benoit Effect. This thing is a full-on megasode, so if you manage to stick around for the whole 2 hours, be sure to voice your opinions and memories in the comments, because we want you to be a part of these conversations too. And if there are any topics that you'd like us to cover in podcast form, then be sure to let us know. With that said, this is WrestleMania 20 and the Chris Benoit Effect. I hope you enjoy. Once again, we've got our good friend Michael Vecchio of the Ciao Italia Edmonton radio show. How you doing,
Yes,
Michael?
hi, Jim. I'm well, Jimmy the Freak. How are you?
Oh, I'm exhausted. I'm heartbroken. I'm at that mood where we're about to reach WrestleMania 40. And a year ago, I was like, I'm going to get tickets. This is going to be the one where I renew my passport, go enjoy Philly. And not only did I not do any of that, this show is coming up close and I just don't care. You know,
that hurts.
Yeah,
that hurts.
The passion is not there, and that means the nostalgia's taking a hit.
You know, I have to say, I don't really watch the WWE at all. The only thing that's key, and AEW with all of its flaws, admitted flaws, and it's not perfect, but that is really the only thing that's keeping me watching wrestling regularly. Even then, it's not. It's certainly not as it once was. So I rely heavily. My wrestling consumption, a large part of it is nostalgia based. Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. But of course, yeah, when we're talking about something that's been going on for 40 years and not having that love, that feel for it, it becomes a very big wax nostalgic sort of mindset where you start looking back, like, when was the last good one? You know, the one where I had that passion. And of course, what's coming up now, the conversation, and this is one that you reached out to me, I'm so glad you did, WrestleMania 20.
Where it all begins again.
That tagline hurts more now than it ever has before.
Yeah, so isn't it interesting? It's WrestleMania 20, and we're talking about the 20th anniversary of WrestleMania 20. And, you know, it's the 20th anniversary of WrestleMania in 2004. And was it the greatest WrestleMania of all time? I would say no, but I still think that WrestleMania 20 was a very solid, a good wrestling show. And definitely when you look back at it nostalgically, you know, there's just plenty of good stuff there. And that's why I reached out to Jim. I said, you know, 20th anniversary of WrestleMania 20 is coming up. Would you like to talk about it? So I thanks for saying yes, because I'm looking really forward to going back and looking at WrestleMania 20. And I hope your listeners on the Jobbed Out will also enjoy our remembrances, and maybe will bring up their own special memories.
Absolutely. And I want to see how this works for our audience, because the Jobbed Out channel is a unique kind of beast here. Half of my audience is so young that they didn't start watching, you know, pre-Super Cena. So a lot of these people are either they don't know, they haven't heard of, or they don't resonate with. And the other half are people from the golden era, who by the time WrestleMania 20 rolled around, they're like, yeah, it's not as good as it was in my day, which is exactly where we kind of stand when it comes to wrestling now.
So what are you saying, Jim? Have we become old men?
Oh, 100%. I have caught myself saying kids these days so much, especially in the last 5 years. I've had to remove myself from Facebook groups because something I've noticed, people obsess with needing to compare anything to anything. You can't just accept something as it is, or treat it on its own merits or value. You know, somebody comes out with, like Dexter Lumis has his stalker character. Oh, he's just a knockoff of DDP. Seriously? How are they even close to similar, other than one of them wore a hood and another one wears gloves? Like, what the hell?
You know, I think that extends to many nowadays in cinemas. It's all about franchises and sagas, right? What happened to the standalone movie?
Studios are afraid to make them.
Yeah.
They're afraid, and that's why you also have so many reboots and retellings and remakes and prequels. It's because they at least know they'll get money from the people who recognize the franchise, as opposed to trying to build something from scratch. You know, if somebody puts out a horror movie and calls it Eyeglasses, like, oh, big deal, I'm going to go about my day. But if somebody says Gremlins, The Reawakening, like, okay, I got to see this. Even if I know it's going to be awful.
And yet you think of, you know, going off the horror franchise, let's say, Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween. I mean, those were original ideas.
I'm guilty on that one too, because in 2019, when the new Child's Play came out and the new Halloween came out, I watched both.
Based on nostalgia.
And really, especially when you look at Child's Play, it did not need to be called Child's Play, because it was not the same story, right? It was essentially... They really could have called it Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, because it was more the evil Krusty doll than it was Chucky.
Featuring Luke Skywalker as the voice of Chucky.
You gotta love Mark Hamill. The best Joker in the history of Batman.
Yes. Absolutely. But going off nostalgia, so let's go back to WrestleMania 20. So, folks, mark your calendar so you can rewatch the event. March 14th, 2004.
True story. First pay-per-view where I was old enough to drink.
So what were you watching the event sober or what?
I had to watch it after the fact, unfortunately. It was one of those ones where I was just refreshing Raja.com and reading the results at the time. Okay. But the second the DVD came out at HMV, I paid, and I think I paid like $49.99 for it. And it was worth every penny. I'm amazed that those discs still ran, because I wore them down so much. I was obsessed with this show.
See, and that goes to show really the power, I guess is that the right word, but the influence that the pro wrestling had in the lives of so many people. And it makes me so happy when I hear stories like that of, you know, maybe it was a little excessive, Jim. You watched it so often, but, you know, it was so special for you. And that makes me happy, really.
Yeah. To me, though, again, the old man, the old crank in me here, just like, I look back and I go, man, times have changed. Because back then, I mean, you and I are both Northern Albertans, and we had wrestling on TV 7 days a week, and it did not feel like enough. We go back to a few years like 2000 and 2001, right? You had Raw or Nitro on Monday, whichever one you missed on Tuesday, Thunder Wednesday, SmackDown Thursday, ECW on Friday, CMLL on Saturday, as well as Stampede and Shotgun or Jacked or Metal. Then Sunday you had Heat, and you had maybe a pay-per-view. Like, there was so much to take in, and we wanted a network. We wanted 24/7. We wanted them to... And nowadays, biggest complaint we got, WWE has 7 hours of TV, and it's too much and too long, and nobody wants to watch that much wrestling
But
anymore.
You know what I think the thing is? It's not so much the duration of the program. I mean, yes, it is, certainly, but it's the quality of the programming.
Oh, God, yeah.
Because if we were getting a 3-hour Ruthless Aggression Raw, you know, I don't think we'd be complaining. The product has changed.
It absolutely has. And the thing is, it changed because of the additional time out there. If you go back and watch an old Raw from 97, let's be honest, the show sucked. But it was so action-packed. There was a lot of stupid... But matches were like 3 minutes long, and you got to see about 20 different performers in a night. Nowadays, they have 3 hours to fill, so what do they fill it with? Long backstage segments and 25-minute matches that are actually aimed towards slowing down for commercial breaks, where nothing, it's my problem with Dynamite as well.
They always have the picture-in-picture, right?
Yeah, so I know that entire first segment after the lockup has no value whatsoever, and I can skip all the way until after picture-in-picture and just forego the first 10, 15 minutes of a match. And that's not how I want to approach, something that's been a lifelong passion. That's not how I want to, deal with that.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. Well, let's get rid of the grumpiness and talk about something that brought us joy, and that is WrestleMania 20.
Can I start with a grumpy note on this thing that gave us joy?
Okay.
So, you've already mentioned it. The tagline for the show, Where It All Begins Again. And something that sticks with me, especially 20 years later, is they gave us our first appearance of Declan McMahon. It was Vince, Shane walking up next to him, and them both carrying Shane's child, where it all begins again, a new generation. And now we know full well, not only is Shane completely erased, like he did not get a penny of the WWE sale, he's not an owner, he has 0 shares, there is no legacy to pass on to Declan because the McMahons no longer own the company.
Yeah, isn't that tragic? Yeah.
I think it absolutely is.
In fact, if I remember correctly, Mr. McMahon was not involved in any storylines or any matches at WrestleMania 20.
That is
But
correct.
he did make an appearance. He came out, I forget exactly at what point during the show, but he did come out onto the stage, the rampway, and basically just, thanked everybody for allowing
funding
this
his personal recreation fund.
But for allowing the milestone of WrestleMania 20 to happen, because we all know WrestleMania 1985 was a huge gamble. Basically, and we talked about this, you and I, on the Vince McMahon episode of who booked these guys, right? The legacy of McMahon. His whole empire was a huge gamble, right?
Yeah.
And tackling the territories. So for him to come out at WrestleMania 20 and just, it was a humble message. Just obviously it fed into his ego and all of his wealth that he accumulated, but it was a humble message of thanking the fans who allowed WrestleMania to become what it had become.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that was something where fans got to feel like we were we're not a part of the family, and most of us aren't shareholders, but we got to feel like we were a part of that success, which is what built that loyalty. So that even when, the product was in its worst times, and a fair amount of WWE, the Raw side especially, was just coming out of its darkest time in a long time, because 2003 was not a fun period of time. Yeah. Getting Kevin Nash and Goldberg and just, it was not entertaining. The rotating list of people that they tried to make into headliners that couldn't do it, like Bubba Ray Dudley and pre-JBL Bradshaw. And,
speaking of Vince, he was in at least 4 matches that year. He competed 4 or 5 times.
In 2003, yeah. He's the first person to ever win a father-daughter match on a major wrestling promotion.
That's right. And he fought a one-legged man. Yeah. But yes, you're right about, the appearance of his grandson. And, the promise of the next generation of McMahon promoter. And obviously current events have tarnished that legacy. I mean, that's certainly a topic we could
it's
discuss
definitely a story for another time. But yeah, you could see the signs for years that Vince was distancing himself from the family. We all heard the stories about Linda, the rumors. They hadn't been together in 20 years, but they were still being cordial for public appearances. The whole issues with Shane leaving the company in 2009, which definitely got brought back up in 2016, and then got brought back up again in 2023, when he was fired and removed again.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a McMahon firing a McMahon behind the scenes?
Not on screen, for sure. All right, so let's start with WrestleMania 20 commemoration, and so it took place Sunday, March 14th, 2004. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about in regards to this specific WrestleMania, and really, I guess all of the WrestleManias until WrestleMania 22, was their settings. So this one was in New York City, Madison Square Garden, of course, the world's most famous arena. And I mentioned WrestleMania 22 because if I'm not mistaken, Jim, that was the last one. That one was in Chicago. And that was the last WrestleMania that was held in a traditional arena, hockey, basketball arena. And ever since then, they've been in massive stadiums. Yeah. Now, WrestleMania had been in big stadiums before. WrestleMania 19, WrestleMania 18, 17
in the Astrodome.
WrestleMania 3. That's right. 1987 was also the Pontiac Silverdome. So it's not like that hadn't happened before. However, now it's exclusively there. And my big critique is that, for me, WrestleMania was a big event, not because of the number of fans who attended, not because of the space of the arena, because of the matches and the stories being told. So WrestleMania 20 is another great example of it's a great event. I would say it's a pretty great event, and it didn't happen in a big stadium. So, it saddens me to see the deaths of the traditional arena when it comes to the WWE nowadays.
Well, nowadays, it's about the money. It's about how many tickets can we sell. But yeah, with Madison Square Garden, like those MSG shows were always a big deal because, at least pre-renovation, they couldn't have the arena look like everybody else. It wasn't configured for it. So you had that little entranceway in the middle behind the ring instead of, the ramp off to the left or to the right in the Attitude Era.
That's right. In fact, even like Survivor Series 2002, there was no stage, right? It was just that little doorway.
Yeah. But when it came to WrestleMania 20, they went all out. They gave us that nice LED skyline. They had the actual floor just past the ramp broadcasting video. So it was animated, which nowadays is not a big deal. Back then, that was huge.
Yeah.
That was an innovation back then. It had this look, it had this feel, the crowds were so loud, and it was a subtle thing, and it shows you how damn good he was at his job. If you watch the beginning of that show, JR doesn't say a damn thing for about a minute. He waits to welcome the people, because you had to see this huge pan of the crowd and get all that noise as Drowning Pool is blaring through the speakers, to just take that in, as opposed to just... cut to the crowd in an immediate welcome everyone.
And see, that's a big moment in a small arena.
Yeah.
And yet is it the hypocrisy? What's the word I'm looking for? That, WWE, they claim that the MSG is their home. And, at least Vince McMahon did because of the roots of WWF in New York State.
Oh, yeah. His father, his grandfather, they both...
And now to turn their back on there because it only holds 16,000 people?
Here's the thing, and when you are a big, rich, eccentric billionaire, petty things become gigantic. And there was a whole issue between Madison Square Garden and Vince McMahon. He was upset they raised the rent for the shows, so he said, we're never going to do a show in your building again. And it's the same thing, it's like he had a falling out with Shane, and it's like, well, he's never going to get a pop on our show again as long as I'm in charge.
Yeah.
At some point, that loyalty ends up going one way. And when it stops going the other way and that first person feels jilted, the whole relationship is done. And Vince McMahon felt he was bigger than Madison Square Garden. And story of his life, the people he says he's grateful to, gets upset when he feels they're not grateful to them, even though they're just doing things the way they have to do it. He took it personally, and we all got to suffer because of it.
And I also think it's a misunderstanding of what makes WrestleMania special. Like I said, sure, being in front of 80,000 people... that's special in its own right. It is cool, and I'm not denying that. But, when you look at the great WrestleMania moments, again, professional wrestling is an art of athletic storytelling. So Steve Austin refusing to submit to Bret Hart. That's a great moment. Does it really matter if that happened in front of 80,000 people or 13,000 people?
Yeah, because the only thing you are going to remember when you think back is his bloody face as he is just screaming in the sharpshooter. You're not thinking about the surroundings outside of the ring.
Exactly.
And that's something that if you look back and with shows in this time period, there's still the Kevin Dunn effect. You will still see matches where the camera's cutting every 2 seconds back then as well. But it was a lot more forgivable because you'll notice tight cuts because the important thing out there was the performer. Whereas now there is a heavy reliance on that hard camera, so you see the entire ring and you see the crowd around the show.
Mm-hmm. That's what it's about.
I don't want to focus on the crowd around the show. I remember getting pissed off at a Jericho match in AEW because I could still see the bat on the apron, and that bat was not Chekhov's gun. They didn't use it. Take it off the apron. It's a distraction now.
That's a great point. Absolutely. So it's almost as if the WWE trying to show off, right?
They're trying to show how big they are now.
Look how many people. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's missing the point of WrestleMania. Yes, it's a big show, but to me, and you remember that famous advertisement, I believe it was WrestleMania 19, the showcase of the Immortals, right? And there's a narrator that says, one day you will die.
Our bodies, though strong, can't defy time. One day, we will die.
It was an advertisement about WrestleMania 19, and it showed, Big Show and Kurt Angle and John Cena in the locker room, just preparing.
Yeah.
And the narrator was basically saying that, we live for moments like WrestleMania, the showcase of the Immortals. It was the storytelling that makes one immortal at WrestleMania, not the size of the crowd, not the size of the arena.
Yeah.
Yes, some WrestleManias had been in big arenas. But again, as a fan, to me, I remember what was happening in the ring, not the size of the crowd.
It's not the size that counts, it's how you use it.
Hogan slamming Andre, I mean, that's a big deal. But again, that would have been a big deal even in a small arena. And it didn't have to be in the Silverdome.
Yeah.
93,000 people.
You didn't need 80,000 people to lose their minds when Elizabeth and Randy Savage reunited.
Yes.
You didn't need to have that large of a crowd because really the only people that mattered at that time were those two people.
Yeah. So I lament that this was now been happening, like I said, since WrestleMania 22. So 18 years now. It's been exclusively, extravagantly large football stadiums. And not only that, not only WrestleMania, that's become the case for Royal Rumble.
That's the Nick Khan effect.
Yeah.
Because Nick Khan was brought in to make money. And they realized all the pay-per-views are such a big deal that he thought, because there was that one where they had to double back with that Money in the Bank a couple years ago. I think it was last year, actually. But the idea is, the big pay-per-views will make it a giant stadium so more people can come out. The small pay-per-views, we will pick select venues that normally don't get shows so we can get that unique cultural impact like we got in Puerto Rico and Australia and soon Germany.
And France, too, actually. Backlash France, yeah.
They've set this whole concept on what shows warrant what kind of stadiums, and they're sticking with just that. But you're 100% right. It loses its value, just like, when there was 4 pay-per-views, they were much bigger deals. When it became 20, people didn't want to watch them.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the stadiums. If they're going to have a stadium show 8 times in a year, how special is it anymore?
Exactly. So I'm just looking here on the internet. The official attendance of WrestleMania 20 was an even 20,000.
20,000 to the dot.
Yeah.
This was before they had to publicly release the info.
Right.
Because Madison Square Garden had a seating capacity of like 13,800. Like, it was not 20 grand.
So they fit in an extra 7 somehow. They squeezed them in there.
They fit an extra 7 out of Vince's ass. They pulled whatever number they wanted to say, but it was probably, realistically, maybe 16K.
And they probably also count event staff, just to inflate their numbers.
Yep. The people catering counting the parking attendants, security, 100%, reception.
So Madison Square Garden has not seen WrestleMania since then. And that's unfortunate. I mean, I think it would have been a very nice thing to have every 10 years at MSG. WrestleMania, the first one, WrestleMania 10, WrestleMania 20. It would have been, appropriate for it to be back for 30 and for 40.
And that was a big deal a decade ago, too, that it wasn't at Madison Square Garden. Granted, I benefited from it because I attended. It was the first time I'd been in the United States. And I got to go to New Orleans, Louisiana, where the weather was perfect for my liking. Louisiana, but New Orleans especially, is a party city. And then you have tens of thousands of people coming specifically to party. Oh, man. It's amazing I remember any of it with how many hurricanes I drank. But it was a really, really fun week. But at the same time, if it was New York, it still would have been WrestleMania 30. It still would have been a gigantic show.
That's right. So I think looking back at the venue of WrestleMania 20 is also bittersweet. Let's be honest, Jim. There will never be WrestleMania at Madison Square Garden again.
No, not likely.
Because that's not the mentality that's going on right now, and I don't see that changing.
Let's just say when they do go back to New York, like they want to make their money, and they end up going to Newark, right?
Yeah.
What's the biggest?
In fact,
MetLife in New Jersey.
Yes, that's right. They had a few WrestleManias in New York State afterwards, but not in Manhattan, right?
I had to do a quick search. Yeah, no, it wasn't Newark. It's East Rutherford. But, like if they want to make money, because that's a capacity of 82,000, so they can say it was 101.
Yeah, and then they can, build a giant replica Brooklyn Bridge, and see, we're still in New York.
And this is normally something that you bring up. I like when they make a custom set. When they have something big enough, like when they tried to do the gigantic pirate ship for Tampa. Of course, I was around for the roller coaster in Orlando. With Orlando, they had to make such a gigantic ramp that even the Undertaker came out through a trap door halfway through, because if he did his normal entrance, we would have been there until 7 in the morning.
Oh boy, we'll talk about Taker a little later on, by the way. But yes, part of what made WrestleMania special and now retrospectively historic was the fact that it was in Madison Square Garden, and as we just said, that's not likely to happen again.
No.
So moving on to the show itself, there were 12 matches on the card.
About 4 good
ones. And I mean, okay, it's not a perfect show, right? It's not one of the greatest.
There's no such thing. As hard as AEW tried, there's no such thing. You have to have low points, or otherwise people are fully exhausted, and then you don't get the crowd reaction to make a good match into a great one. But, they started off with somebody that fans may have heard of, that people weren't booing yet at that time, John Cena, challenging the Big Show.
And that was his first WWE, first championship in the WWE.
Yeah.
The United States title.
And people were begging for it. Because Cena had just been a heel for most of 2002 and half of 2003. He just had his coming out at Survivor Series. People wanted to cheer him. People wanted to see him be the next guy, which has got to be a crazy thought for people who've been watching wrestling for the last 20 years. People wanted to hop on to the Cena's momentum.
And, spoiler alert, I guess not, but just 1 year later, WrestleMania 21, he wins the WWE title, his first. So we decided to talk about, again, like I said, there was 12 matches. We're not going to talk about all of them, but
because some of them were duds, and again, they it just had to be that way. At this point in the WWE, Vince McMahon did not give, and JTG said it in an interview with me, Vince McMahon did not give a shit about the tag teams. So there's 2 tag team title matches, none of them mattered. That's pretty much all you need to know. None of them mattered. They put every single tag team they could find into each match. I think there was 8 tag teams between the 2 matches. There's nothing memorable about them at all, because there was no story. They just had to get them on the card.
Mm-hmm. They cobbled it together, basically.
Absolutely. And it felt very much like somebody was playing GM mode on SmackDown vs. Raw and just had to get some people in there. Fill a spot. This applied to the women, too. You thought the tag teams weren't getting any damn respect. Think about women in tag teams in the WWE in 2004.
Yeah.
Because they tried to do a whole Playboy evening gown match. Who cares?
Well, that was the famed bathroom break portion of the show, when people would get up and leave and take their break.
Yeah.
And
normally,
I used to watch...
that's supposed to be the second last match of the card, but they ran that one, 5th?
I used to watch these big pay-per-view events, again, before the WWE Network and streaming and all that. I used to go to a movie theater and watch it with a group of people.
Hell yeah.
We collectively shared the experience of watching the show. And yeah, those types of matches, the evening gown or other women's matches that weren't for the title, were often the times when people would get up.
Yeah, the popcorn match, go to concessions.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I'm with you on that. You and I wouldn't meet for another decade or so, but I imagine we were both in the same Silver City Theater for a lot of these shows.
Can you imagine that? It's like, oh, but yeah, isn't that something?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was there. So let's talk about some of the matches here. Again, we won't go into too much detail, but amongst the most prominent, we have decided to talk about the return of The Undertaker versus his brother Kane.
Right.
WWE Championship, Eddie Guerrero defending against Kurt Angle. The final match up until that point in the WWE of Bork Lesnar and Bill Goldberg. The WWE, the Women's Championship, Victoria defending against Molly Holly, and of course, triple threat for the World Heavyweight Championship, Chris Benoit, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels.
I believe you mean Triple H versus Shawn Michaels versus Redacted.
Yes, correct. Thank you for that correction. That's important. So let's start, I guess, going off the tagline of where it all begins again, and that's very important, very appropriate for The Undertaker, who returned as the dead man. So for 3 years, I believe it was the year 2000, he started appearing as the American Badass, which then morphed into Big Evil, basically the biker taker, right?
But yeah, at this point, wrestling was getting more real. This was the counter to WCW. And there were rumors that at one point, this was the character that he was going to take with him to WCW because he can't be The Undertaker. He basically just wanted to be more like himself, angry Texan with a motorcycle. It helped us get a lot more Kid Rock and Limp Bizkit at a time where people actually wanted to listen to Kid Rock and Limp Bizkit.
And, I think it was a good change. Undertaker has now, since his retirement, really opened up and done numerous interviews. And, he has talked about how it was necessary for him to
100%.
To ditch the supernatural Undertaker.
If you ask a bunch of fans today, which version of Undertaker was the one they liked the least, there's 2 answers. Some will say Big Ginger, which was right before he became Dead Man again, and a lot will say Ministry Taker, which was right before he became American Badass.
I would say Ministry Taker.
I liked Ministry Taker. I hated Big Ginger.
I liked when he was heel Big Evil, not when he was face Big Evil, because he was both of those, right? In fact, when he was buried alive by Kane at the Survivor Series 2003, he was face.
That's right. And, Kane decided to set foot and make the biggest mistake of his career, besides unmasking.
Actually, I'll push back on that. We talked about how it was necessary for Undertaker to change. I liked the Kane unmasking storyline, particularly at the beginning.
In the beginning, it was great.
The psychopath, right?
When he had the chains and the security and that was very good. But it also, and you know, in all honesty, it gave him a lot more paths in the road he could take. So it definitely gave him more longevity. Just
Absolutely.
And he needed to get out of the tag teams. It was a joke that I had made in one of my shorts talking about Team Hell No. And I said it's the wackiest partnership to happen to Kane since Kane and RVD, or Kane and X-Pac, or Kane and the Hurricane. Because that was all they were doing, was sticking him in a tag team with somebody small and goofy.
Absolutely. I mean, I think people had started to not take Kane seriously anymore.
Yeah, he cried a little too much, which is normally a criticism for the Big Show. But now that you could see his face, it was always him, like, just ready to shed tears. Like, he seemed whinier. And, you know, when he went on his whole, who put The Undertaker into a coma? You know, it's just, he was emoting more than he needed to, possibly as overcompensation for not being allowed to emote for so long. And that that was a big turnoff for the character. I don't want Kane to be human and relatable like the rest of us. I want these wrestlers to be larger than life.
And, you know, it's funny that, if you remember, Kane delivered a eulogy for his brother, Undertaker, right after the Survivor Series. Mm-hmm. And basically, he said those same things, that Undertaker had become too human. Yep. And he became one of you. And that's why you had to bury him. I buried him alive.
Yeah. And, he became supernatural, and now Kane could no longer take 3 tombstones before getting pinned. Bit of a spoiler.
That's right. That's right. So let's talk about that match and the build-up briefly. I have to, you know, and speaking of Kane, we cannot, I certainly can't, and I think everybody would agree that we can't give Kane enough credit because he built that feud single-handedly. Undertaker was not seen.
That was a bit of a running theme, because also, I mean, that's also how it happened with Bray Wyatt later on, is these people have to use the Undertaker name, but the Undertaker himself isn't present for a lot of this.
Right.
If he showed up beforehand or said something or gave a visage of his appearance, it destroys the reveal.
Absolutely. And that was one of the great moments, was when he came back at WrestleMania 20.
Oh, God, I forgot. John Cena did that, too, with The Undertaker. That sucked so bad.
Yeah, well, that doesn't exist to me.
Hey, it happened. But it's part of the, well, not part of the streak, but part of the reign.
God. Okay, back to 2004.
I'm just here to ruin Michael's nostalgia. That's my whole purpose.
So from November 2003 Survivor Series to March 2004, Undertaker was not present. Nope. WWE did a really good job, and as I said, Kane did a really good job of selling the menace of the returning Undertaker. And, all of the promos, the whole build-up was basically one man. It was Kane and the special effects that they used. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was really, really good storytelling. I mean, that's the kind of theatrical wrestling at its finest.
No, I have no disagreements there. And that was what WWE did best. Because, other wrestling companies, well, TNA, but other wrestling companies wouldn't have been able to do this sort of supernatural element, because they were based more in realism, more on the actual ring work and, hey, you, let's fight. Them's fighting words, that kind of mindset. Yes, whereas WWE was all about the spotlight, the presentation, the fog machine, and the entrances. So it was about getting that big pop, and the match was secondary. And if you want proof of that, The Undertaker's career at this point was still very much in that pre-Renaissance. He wasn't, the mid-'90s, all I know is a choke kind of Undertaker. Or the early 90s, I should say. But his ring work was not the greatest, because it didn't need to be.
Mm-hmm. And you're right. I mean, if you look at, they had already, Kane and Undertaker had faced each other already at WrestleMania 14. And this match of WrestleMania 20, it's not one of the great Undertaker-Kane matches, but it's the storyline that made it.
Yeah, but what drove me nuts, and I've alluded to this earlier, WrestleMania 14, it took 3 tombstones to take Kane down.
Yeah,
this
and
one,
only one.
Just one. So, okay, so does this mean now that Kane is weaker? Does this mean Undertaker is stronger? Or is this just on to the next. And really, the match didn't even go 8 minutes, so it was on to the next.
Yes, yeah, pretty much. And so thankfully it was, as we said, the story, the build-up that really made it a WrestleMania moment. And of course, Kane comes down to the ring, and we talked about the set earlier and how the whole city of New York was on fire when he came down to the ring.
That was so cool, because the background was static. We weren't used to there actually being that level of customization. That really stuck.
Even Jerry Lawler, I remember commenting on it. Oh, the buildings are on fire. Then we have, oh yes, and of course a big ass pop. How could you not, right?
And that, if I'm not, they actually used that in the DVD. So in the DVD menu screen for any pay-per-view, you would get the theme song from the pay-per-view, but they recut "Step Up" by Drowning Pool. So that, when it comes down to the drum and the low point, you're gonna get knocked down. Then all of a sudden it would cut to, oh yes, and actually show different clips of it. That stuck with me more than any promo that Paul Bearer had ever done in his career, because now they actually, again, customized it. They made it uniquely theirs.
It was so great to see him. Paul Bearer is such an important part of the Undertaker's legacy. And if I'm not mistaken, so he had left the company maybe a few years earlier, 3 or 4 years earlier. And if I remember correctly, obviously WWE was approaching him with the return of the Undertaker imminent at WrestleMania 20. They had approached him to come back, obviously, because that would be an important part. And he was very overweight, morbidly obese. Bill Moody, of course, Paul Bearer.
That was a lifelong struggle for him.
WWE, or at least Jim Ross, I read this in his one of his books there, he agreed to cover the costs of weight loss surgery, bariatric surgery, if he would come back for WrestleMania 20.
Which... Actually, that story kind of makes it worse a little, because, we hear about the WWE-funded rehab, and it's they're doing something good for his health. But reality is, they're doing it so that they can get the cog they need for their show.
Yeah. Yeah, they used him. But he also used them, right? Pay for this surgery, and I'll come.
Yeah, because he probably would not have gotten it without them, yeah. Fair.
Yeah. So, and even then, he was thinner, but when you do see him at WrestleMania 20, he's still bigger than he was, in the early 90s.
But at that same time, it almost worked for him, I guess. The look was good in that sense, as opposed to... I'm sure you've seen the skinnier Percy Pringle, or I don't know if you ever saw Vince Russo's Ring of Glory, the Christian wrestling fed. Skinny Paul Bearer, in that case, he was Skinny the Devil. Really skinny knockoff of James Mitchell is what he was. It didn't have the same look. He needed to... That weight was part of the package. Yeah. It also helped because, if he was skinnier, then it would be well, why isn't he getting involved? Why isn't he, cheating like all the other managers?
Right. I also appreciated that at his return at WrestleMania 20... he was the classic Paul Bearer with, the pale face hair. And the black hair. Because in the 90s, when Kane debuted, he's alive, Undertaker, you really heard the Alabama accent, and he had the brown hair, and he had no makeup on, right?
Yeah, he was just some guy who's... Some creep who slept with Taker's mom.
That's right. Yeah. Where now he returned to being the undead funeral director. So I appreciated that. And then, of course, we see the Druids and the chanting, and the Undertaker comes back. And it's interesting because it's a mix of American Badass, Big Evil, and the Dead Man. He's a hybrid Undertaker now. He still has the MMA gloves, and he still has, much of the ring gear was largely similar to what he was wearing as Big Evil. But, now he has the long coat and the hat. And his hair was still growing. Right?
Yeah, I completely misinterpreted it at the time. Like, yeah, a lot of people nowadays, they're saying, yeah, it was a hybrid. He had taken what he had from both characters and that it was intentional. I legitimately thought it was just because his hair didn't grow back fast enough, so that they were trying to, like, hide the weaknesses. I did not, at that time, know that it was anywhere near that intricate. So, I mean, it's a good catch.
Yeah.
Because, again, like I said, at this point, it was, I had just legally begun to start drinking. So.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because I admittedly didn't pick up on that at the time, but looking back on it, I think it becomes clear that it was him mixing both eras of the Undertaker into this new creation, and of course eventually his hair did grow long again, and he would start to wear more of the traditional Undertaker ring attire.
Yeah.
But for those first few years, yeah, it really was a mix of the new and old Undertaker.
Legit, again, where it all begins again. That applied 100% to him because this was the beginning of his renaissance. 2006, 2007, 2008, these were the peak of his career. Mm-hmm. And then eventually we got to the point again where it's like, okay, you've been this guy for 15 years now. Can we get something fresh? Can we get Big Evil back? And we did in 2020.
And we did. That's right. But certainly it was a great WrestleMania moment, and I'll never forget it. Certainly, I can imagine what it was like to be in the Garden at that time. And we talk again, going back to the arena discussion. Would it have been as impactful if it wasn't in that more intimate setting of the Garden?
Yeah.
So let's go on to the next match.
Yeah, from the darker note to something a little more cheerful.
Yeah. In no particular order here. Let's go to the WWE Championship match. So Eddie Guerrero had won the title No Way Out in February 2004. So he had just been a champion for about a month. Mm-hmm. And now he was defending against Kurt Angle. And obviously we know the story of the unlikely champion of Eddie Guerrero. And,
it was so good.
Guys that size were never considered seriously for the top spot.
He had vanilla midget syndrome, as Kevin Nash had put it. But, he, for the longest time, was a cruiserweight. In WCW, his whole thing was he has a mullet and he frowns. And for a long time, that's what his career was built on. He had a mullet and he frowns. And then he came to WWE and he became, I'm Mark Henry with a mullet. He started doing the whole constantly horny, wanting to take China, trying not to cheat on China.
Asita and all that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was actually after he was released, too. Because, he has constantly, as a small guy, had to, and after a car crash and some massive issues after his painkiller addiction and his alcoholism, he was someone who put on a lot of weight really fast, is the nice way to put it at this time. Mm-hmm. But he was a very sympathetic figure. He had the fans behind him because he did things differently. He wasn't just your generic babyface doing things by the rules and having a couple cool moves. He lied, he cheated, and he stole.
Yeah.
The vignettes with him and Chavo pretty much pretending to be pool cleaners so that they could completely take over somebody's backyard, or pretending to be, I think they were pretending to be maintenance workers to get onto a prestigious golf course, to which they proceed to rob a couple Carlton Banks types and then stole their girls.
Yeah, Los Guerreros. That was a really fun time. You talked about how tag teams are often overlooked in this time period, but they were one of the highlights, I think, of the SmackDown tag division.
Yeah, but what does Vince do when a tag team gets over? He splits them up. And Eddie definitely got the better half of that. Chavo got Janetti'd pretty badly. Mm-hmm. Although, that's still not fair, because Chavo even had a match that he won. He won a title on this show, but he was never going to get to the heights that Eddie was, because Eddie put on the pounds. I
will say this, Jim. To me, and maybe this is a topic for another time, I actually liked Kerwin White.
Me too. But I just I'm the devil's advocate, So, and we all know where this was going to go. He was not going to be Kerwin White a year later. And I think the only reason the plan changed is because there was an idea that Eddie was going to take on Shawn Michaels instead if he had lived into 2006. Right. But we all know where this was going to go. It was the same as Bubba Ray and Reverend Devon. Eventually, Eddie was going to get to Chavo and make him re-embrace his roots.
Right.
And that's something we all wanted to see. We did want to see it.
Unfortunately, of course, with Eddie's death, the Kerwin angle was dropped immediately, right?
Absolutely.
And Chavo, so yes, he rightfully went back to his roots, but we lost the story.
Yeah. It's not the journey that we wanted. Even if a positive comes from it, in general, we don't want a death to be the reason for a positive change.
Yeah. No, I don't think Kerwin White had run its course yet.
No.
So I wanted to see it, but, obviously circumstances.
Oh, God,
happened.
it would have been so good.
Yeah.
If it ain't white, it ain't right.
And I wake up every morning, can't wait to embrace the day.
I take my coffee by the pool.
Right on.
I'm glad that song got some more use. It's a shame it had to go to Michael Cole.
Okay, so back to the match. So Eddie Guerrero's defending his title against Kurt Angle. Now, is this is around the era of the Wrestling Machine, Kurt Angle, correct?
Just before. This, I believe, was just coming out of SmackDown General Manager Kurt Angle.
Right, when he was pretending to be disabled, of course.
Yeah. And
Big Show had chokeslammed him.
It was a blessing and a burden for Kurt Angle. Earlier on, I just ranted about people having to compare everything to everything, but Kurt Angle had the same role as the Big Show did, in that no matter what you need, if you need a comedy guy, if you need a fierce heel, if you need a moralistic babyface, if you need a sanctimonious mouthpiece, Kurt Angle will fill that spot. And in this case, people did want to see Kurt Angle succeed. He won a Battle Royal, a SmackDown Rumble, in order to challenge Eddie.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, it's not his time to win this. And people didn't want to see Kurt Angle win because it was Eddie Guerrero on top. If it was JBL, if it was Brock Lesnar, if it was Chris Benoit, people would have embraced Kurt Angle huge on this. And the match, it was a good match. It didn't feel like a WWE Championship level match. It took a little bit of creativity, of course, and that's what you rely on Eddie for in order to make this match different from your standard mid-show WWE Championship match. And
right.
All it took, and it felt like it should have been more at the time, all it took was him unlacing his boot. That was all.
That's right. That's right.
It felt like there could have been more. It felt like we could have had the chair staple. It felt like, maybe if Eddie was in the ankle lock and climbed over the ref or something, there could have been some more lying, cheating, and stealing. So I mean, the match, I don't want to say it fell flat. It was a very good match that should have been great.
I can agree with you. I think I've rewatched it actually not too long ago. I think from an athletic standpoint, from a wrestling perspective, it's a pretty solid match. But there was that's something that was kind of missing to make it a great WrestleMania match.
And how was it going to happen? They only had a few weeks to do it, right? There was no story between Eddie and Kurt Angle because, again, Kurt Angle just won a Battle Royal just before the show.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only story really that if I can remember was that Angle going after Eddie's worth as a champion.
And big whoop, Brock just did this. At least when Brock did it, it was it was your worth because you're an addict. He really laid into that, and that's where we got the best Eddie Guerrero promo of his entire career.
The truth is, Brock, I am an addict. In the shower, in the locker room, oh man, I was high, bro. I was high. And I don't remember much about that night, I said, but what I do remember, they carried me out of that arena and they carried me straight into rehab. Through all that time, bro, through all those 3 years, not only did I wind up losing my job, I lost my wife, I lost my kids, and I lost myself. I disgraced my race, I disgraced my family, and I disgraced myself. I'm addicted to the satisfaction that I get to tell everybody like you that didn't believe in me, you can stick it up your ass.
He had everybody behind him.
Yes. Genuinely.
You
know, just like, the Danielson and the Yes movement, right? I mean, that was a genuine embrace of a guy.
Yeah. That's just it. And I mean, he tried so hard, and it's amazing for him because before WWE, he was a heel. And after WWE, he did his best to be a heel. Yeah. Some of his best stuff in AEW is him being a heel. But the most we get from him as a heel is, I recycle and you're fickle. Like, he just wasn't capable of it based on the restrictions of the programming.
Yes.
Yes.
And so Guerrero, and so this whole thing, as you said, Eddie was truly loved, and of course, so a year and a half later, he's dead at 38 years old.
Yeah, I still have both my Eddie Guerrero shirts. I have the
Viva la Razza, right?
No, I've got the tribute one after he passed away.
I'm your Papi,
and the
right?
I'm your Papi shirt.
Yeah, even when he was a heel, like, when he was feuding with Mysterio about Dominic and all that, people still loved that, I mean, for God's sakes, Mysterio wearing the I'm Your Papi shirt at the next night on the Raw Memorial show.
Oh, that was such a tough time. That was a tough time to be a wrestling fan.
So we'll leave Eddie Guerrero for now because he's going to come up a little later on.
Yeah, but like when it came to this match, and this is unfortunate because you had two great athletes having an athletic match who put on a very good match that should have been great, but the only thing that resonates, that sticks with me 20 years later, is that he unlaced his boot.
Because the finish.
It felt like Kurt Angle should not have taken a 3 count for that. Because he got rolled up. And it's like, the only thing dumber than getting a distraction roll-up loss because of what happened on the ramp is getting a distraction roll-up loss because you're holding a shoe.
It could have been a stronger, cheating finish. I would agree.
Yeah. At least, roll him up and hold the ropes, Maybe yank on the singlet. Maybe they thought that would be too heelish of them. But, I mean, here's how I would do it. Say during the match, and now it's becoming a bit too common, during the match, a turnbuckle gets exposed. So they do the whole thing with the boot. Angle ends up hitting the exposed turnbuckle, falls on the ground. Then get Eddie to hit the frog splash. That would have been a definitive finish. And I think it would have had a more powerful end because it was a goofy cheat that led to an actual match ender.
Especially for, the caliber of, the intensity of a wrestler like Kurt Angle.
Yeah, he's wrestling Kurt Angle, not Mark Jindrak. Let's go.
Yeah, he shouldn't have, you're right. Yeah, I think it could have been...
If he was wrestling Orlando Jordan, that would have been perfect, but then not at WrestleMania.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. So moving on from that, let's go to another match here on the card, where it all begins again, and for these two men, it was where it all ends.
By chance, do you remember where you were when you found out Brock Lesnar was quitting? Because I know exactly where I was.
No, I can't say I recall, actually.
So I, at that point, had a Samsung flip phone, and I was at a bus stop next to my high school, waiting to go hang out and go to an arcade with a buddy of mine who was at another school. And I was just waiting for my bus, and my flip phone did have a web browser, and like I said before, I use Raja. And I saw Brock Lesnar quitting after WrestleMania. And I had the same reaction that the people in Madison Square Garden went. Obviously, we didn't have all the details we have now, but I thought, geez, what an ungrateful piece of crap. And I mean, we all knew Goldberg was leaving because he signed a 1-year deal the night after WrestleMania 19. That means it's going to be over the night after WrestleMania 20. We all knew he was going. And what a lot of people forget, and I guess something that I might as well bring up here, even though we've already passed it, Eddie Guerrero, when he beat Brock Lesnar, it was because of Goldberg interference.
That's right.
That part kind of gets forgotten, that Goldberg was the reason. So, I mean, it wasn't a clean win over Lesnar, although it was a damn good win over Lesnar.
Yeah.
But that's where this story pretty much... I mean, the story really began with a backstage segment where the two bumped into each other, Goldberg and Lesnar.
Rumble.
Yeah, when they were both champs. So actually, before the Royal Rumble, I think it was Survivor Series. They bumped into each other, and they both had titles. And I can't remember if Lesnar cost Goldberg his title. I don't think he did.
No, Goldberg lost at Armageddon in a triple threat with Kane and Triple H.
Yeah, right. All right. But yeah, like, Lesnar antagonized Goldberg backstage at Survivor Series. And I think there was another thing after he lost title where Lesnar laughed at him, but I need to go back and check for sure.
Yeah, I was at the Royal Rumble. Lesnar eliminates Goldberg.
Yeah.
Who came in at number 30, if I'm not mistaken.
So their story was longer than people would think, but at the same time it wasn't detailed as much as people would think, because this was basically all done backstage.
Well, this is an example of one of those, it's a dream match because there were the
big
two
meaty men slapping meat.
That's right. Yeah. And, the biggest star, one of the biggest stars of WCW against, the next big thing of WWE, Brock Lesnar. So, I mean, yeah, on paper, it's a great matchup. Unfortunately, as you said...
This was a case where the internet wrestling community ruined the show, ruined the match. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't have the details of Goldberg's contract, and we don't have the details that Brock is turning his back on the company, and again, now we know what we know. We know about the addiction issues, we know about the bottle of vodka a night, and it's a lot more forgivable now. But back then, we just thought he was using WWE to be famous enough to go do something else. These two got rattled so hard by the piss-poor reaction they got, like, from the very beginning, that they not only didn't... Like, when The Rock and Hogan didn't get the reaction that they thought they were going to get at WrestleMania 18, they put on a headlock and said, okay, I'm going to be the heel now, you're going to be the babyface, and we're going to change this. Yeah. These two were both, like, basically getting you both suck chants. Nobody wanted to see either of them. The only person getting cheered was Austin, as he's like waving at the two of them, and he's like, for God's sake, son, lock up. They didn't have a chance. And they knew, because Goldberg was obviously supposed to be the face, but any big move he hits, he's going to get booed anyway.
Yeah.
And because of that, you'd think he'd switch that to Lesnar, but any big move he hits, he's going to get booed anyway.
And I think there really was a sense of disappointment with Brock Lesnar particularly, because of the massive push that he received. And we
thought really he was going to be the guy. If he
he was the guy. He was the guy. I mean, it's just to think that he would be leaving for the NFL, or he was given the world. And disappointingly, when he comes back, almost 10 years later, again, Vince throws everything at him. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why, and this is a separate topic, but I have never liked Brock Lesnar. I appreciated him more during the next big thing era,
when he was an actual wrestling super machine. Yeah.
Yes. But, ever since the departure in 2004 and his return, and how he was booked as this unstoppable beast, and he was only a part-timer, I hated it from day one. And, I respect him as an athlete. Surely he is a great physical, athletic specimen.
Yeah.
But I don't like him as a wrestler. I don't like him as an entertainer.
How do you feel about him, knowing what you know about him as a person?
Well, even...
Because, I forgot. We should be saying Goldberg defeated Redacted by pinfall.
Yeah.
But,
technically, that's right. Well, even it just adds even more to my negative perception of him.
Yeah.
I have never liked him, and I jokingly, whenever I talk about him to Jim and other people, I call him, to me, he's Bork Laser.
Yep.
He's Bork to me. I don't like him. So yeah, I think it was very disappointing that he would have left back in '04 under those circumstances.
Yeah. And the thing is, this is someone that we know now. It's like, we didn't know then, but we could have figured, he was someone that Sable was cheating on his husband with. He was someone who, after the WWE, at one point in a Minnesota Vikings training camp, a kid asked him to sign a poster. It was a WWE poster, so he tore it up in front of the kid and threw it at him. You don't throw anything at an 8-year-old. Now we know about the texts. We know about him basically re-signing with the WWE for that SummerSlam 2022 match, solely based on him getting a legal assistant as a prostitute.
In fact, he's even been criticized for agreeing to break in the streak at WrestleMania 30. If I know that there were other people that were considered to break the streak, among them Edge, Adam Copeland. And if I remember correctly from what I've read, Adam Copeland said, no, thank you for considering me, for offering me, but I don't want this. I don't want to break the streak, So if you call it humility, whatever you want. And I know that there's been criticism of, yes, okay, Vince decided the streak is over, but the Brock said, yeah, okay. That he took that. Did he deserve it? Did he really? Was he the guy that needed to take the streak? First off, the streak, in my opinion, shouldn't have ended. But
he shouldn't have had the
was
match.
He really?
Because he would have still been the same super tank if he, instead of wrestling the Undertaker at Mania, say that one's completely off the table. If he had that SummerSlam match with Cena and squashed him with the 16 suplexes, he would have been just as fine. Beating the Undertaker in itself did get a lot of heat. Really, the person whose career it impacted the most was Cesaro, because Cesaro couldn't get ahead at all. His only push came from being paired up with Paul Heyman, whose job was to say, Brock Lesnar beat the Undertaker. He's the 1 in 21. Oh, and I have Cesaro here. That was the only purpose of him being a part of anything there. But, no, he didn't need to beat it. With Lesnar, it became a footnote. It was not the most significant thing Lesnar would do. And that is not how... The Undertaker's legacy should not have ended on something that was not going to be the most important thing the guy who beat him would do.
And not only that, I think it's just, frankly, he didn't deserve it.
Yeah,
I don't think Brock deserved it. So going back to, especially, and we're going back to 2004. This is a guy who was given the world, left, and then comes back, and he's gifted.
Well, he came back, and he was there for 2 years before this happened.
Yes, it didn't happen immediately. But just the point being that he was given this reward. Should that have happened?
And you know what? If this had happened a few years later, again, say the Cena thing happens, say the Universal title runs happen, because at one point he was champ for a year. Granted, we still hate him because he never showed up to work, but if he beat The Undertaker in 2017 instead of 2014, this could have worked. Because then we could say, but he's accomplished all this.
Yeah.
Then we could say, I don't like it, but we can't say he doesn't deserve it.
Absolutely, and I think that could also be said of when he was the next big thing. He eliminated Undertaker from Royal Rumble 2003, right? He beat him in Hell in a Cell. So if he would have maybe defeated him during that period at WrestleMania, I think it would have had more lasting effect for the legacy of Brock Lesnar.
I only disagree because at that point in time, the streak wasn't significant.
Yes, you're right. Absolutely.
That's the only flaw in that one. But, good God. We've barely talked about Goldberg and Lesnar.
So, really, what is there to say? The match is memorable for the wrong reasons. The crowd gave it, let them have it.
Let's be blunt. They shat on it.
Yeah.
They shat on everything about this match.
And you know what? Deservedly so. It was even Goldberg. Yes, he was known He had only signed a 1-year contract, but it really seemed as if, you know, he had come to WWE solely for a paycheck.
Yeah.
And, you know, he
well,
wasn't
just
there.
That's what it was, because it wasn't like he was bought out of his Warner thing. His Warner thing had fully been paid out to him. Mm-hmm. How to kill your YouTube channel in one sentence. I blame the wrestling fans. Because, again, without that information, without knowing about Lesnar's leaving, his resignation, without knowing about Goldberg's contract expiry, these two could have done their match as they had scripted it, and it would have been perfectly fine. And people would have embraced it. Here, they couldn't stick to their script, and they couldn't figure out what to do on the fly. They were stuck. And I blame the fans on that.
Well, it ruined it, certainly, because, again, we knew things that we weren't supposed to know.
Mm-hmm.
But once the cat was out of the bag, I mean, there was no recovery, and so...
Let's also give credit where credit is due. When they did eventually have their rematch, and I'm not talking about WrestleMania 33, I'm talking about Survivor Series, that was awesome. Yeah. It was 90 seconds of awesome.
Jim, I cannot tell you how just happy I was to see Lesnar lose so quickly. I was euphoric.
See, I'm someone who...
I was euphoric, because as I told you, I hate the guy.
I think I disliked Goldberg more than I disliked Lesnar, personally.
Well, it wasn't even about Goldberg. It was just about Lesnar losing so emphatically.
Losing in a squash.
And seeing Heyman cry. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. Speaking of crying, I wanted to just bring up one match. It wasn't a gigantic match, but it was a WrestleMania moment. This was Victoria and Molly Holly. Because...
Hair versus hair.
It was hair versus title, I believe. So Victoria's hair was never on the line. But the thing was, and I've talked about this extensively on our channel, the women probably got less respect than the tag teams. You know, they were there for TNA, for old perv man Vince to get his rocks off. And both of these women were established, capable, technical wrestlers. Molly had been in the business for, about 6-7 years at this point? She was trained by Dean Malenko. She knew how to go, and there wasn't going to be a match on the card for them. The only reason they got this match, the only reason the women's champion got to defend her title at WrestleMania, was because she basically said, I will give you a WrestleMania moment. How about we shave my head? Remember the thing from that 70s show? It was like, guys have their cars, girls have their hair.
And it's still that to this day. I mean, absolutely. I mean, you could certainly see more people embracing, the bald is beautiful. But, hair is very important to a woman.
Yeah. It
still
is a big factor in their identity.
Yeah.
And this sort of thing that she's willing to sacrifice her entire look, her appearance, in let's face it, something that's meant to publicly humiliate her for the sake of just getting on the show. Because they're not going to put her in the Playboy evening gown match, and neither of them should be in an evening gown match. Not because they're not attractive. They're both very attractive people. But because they are wrestlers on a wrestling show. They weren't John Laurinaitis, lingerie model hires.
It goes to show the evolution of the appreciation of women's wrestling. Mm-hmm. How, it was hair pulling and snapmares to, now the women's roster that we have today.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the very few things that I say that is better about the current product is, we're actually getting the proper respect for women's wrestling.
Oh man, there are people in my comment section who hate modern wrestling because of it. They want to go back to the lingerie models.
I will say this though. I agree to the extent that why can't some of that still be there?
Right? Is there any reason we can't have both?
Yeah, exactly. Remember they used to have, the Divas magazine or Divas on the Beach.
Yeah.
To me, that was that they were strong and beautiful.
Yeah, because for the longest time, the way of the wrestling world just never had them both sync up. You could have talented wrestlers, or you can have attractive women. But and this really did start to change with Lita and Trish.
Yeah.
Because Lita was someone who trained to wrestle and then started to embrace her attractive side, Whereas Trish was the opposite side. She was a model and a yoga instructor who was very attractive, who wanted to put the work in and learn to wrestle. So they found that middle ground, and it's tough. You cannot please everyone in this business.
It's true. But I would agree that the complete abandonment of that side, the feminine side of the women's wrestler, I don't agree with that. Again, so Trish, Lita, Victoria, those are all prime examples. Ivory, Jacqueline, who all participated in swimsuit shoots and also were great wrestlers. So why can't we have that with Becky Lynch and Rhea Ripley? Why can't
with their consent, of course? That's got to be the big thing. If Rhea Ripley says, "I don't want to do this because I'm here to," I mean, she wouldn't. Well, if you follow Rhea Ripley online, she is so happy with how many people are thirsty and want her to step on them or would like to have her sit on their faces. Like she's embraced it, and she's actually put out a thing saying, like, thanking the pervs.
It's come to the point now, because we don't have these swimsuit pictorials and such. You go on online and you'll just find people who take ringside photos of the women's wrestlers in their ring gear, and that's what we have to look at. We have to look at their bottoms and their curves, but they're not it's like a unofficial photo.
It feels creepy. It's like voyeurism to me.
Yes,
but
yes.
I get
if
so.
Becky is bending over the top rope,
or Liv Morgan sits on the middle rope, like she leans against it. And I have a problem with this too, again, because for people who have followed my channel, who know me on a more personal level here, I have a lot of experience working in the adult industry. So it bugs me, though, as a wrestling fan, when I'm in a group and people talk about, let's have an appreciation for this wrestler, and it's 4 bikini pictures, and it's like, have you ever even watched their matches? Like, is this something, is there anything about their wrestling that you like? I mean, can you imagine if people are like, this is a Gable Stevenson appreciation post, and it's just, him in a freaking Speedo. It's like, well, he's a shit wrestler, so should we be appreciating him as a wrestler?
I think there should be. Like I said, I do appreciate, and I think that it's the right move that we focused more on the women as wrestlers. But I do think that there is space for them to still be sexy women.
Absolutely.
And I don't agree with the total erasure of the swimsuit edition and those kinds of things.
And that's something I appreciate with AEW. They tell the women, do what you want. When it comes to their roster, I'm trying to think, how many women on the AEW roster have OnlyFans and do the modeling shoot still? You got Toni Storm, you got Kiera Hogan, you've got I was gonna say Paige Van Zant, but she had one match and then never came back. Like these people, if they want to do it, they want to show off their bodies, and they want to put that attract. Because it's also a thing about trying to show their femininity.
Yes,
I'm not saying they have to do it, but if they want to do it, let them.
Let them, absolutely. And even recently in AEW, there's Mariah May, who look on her Facebook. It's all pretty sexy. It's hot stuff.
Oh, she interacts with the pervs. It's fantastic. Yeah, if you don't watch it, I do always recommend it. There's a show that AEW puts out on their YouTube channel every Sunday, Hey EW with RJ City. Watch the Mariah May one.
It's really funny.
It is hilarious. I think they've only had a couple duds. And again, it lets them do something that they may not have time, or it may not fit the format of TV. When it comes again to this women wrestler versus attractive women on a wrestling show, one of the best, it's a common trope, and maybe it's even a bit of a cliche, but opening up that opportunity also gets the perfect moment for, say, Zoe Stark to come to the ring and be upset that attention is going to these women in lingerie and evening gowns when she busts her ass and wrestles. So you can have those storylines, that intermingling. It gives them something to do because a big problem with a lot of wrestling across all these shows now, proof that women are an afterthought, if they're not in a title picture, they're not on the show. So giving this sort of opportunity allows for extra storylines to be created so that they can actually be better utilized.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point of, you know, if they don't want to, you know, go in that sort of sexy model route, they don't have
cool.
to.
You got 138 people on that roster. Put someone in who does want to do it.
But you shouldn't have to. I mean, and this is, you know, the great example of being restricted is certainly Mandy Rose, who was making much more money as eye candy.
Yeah,
then, you know, I mean, she was doing pretty risque things.
Yeah, that's just it.
You know.
She was going against the ambassadorship clause. Like, she wasn't posing in a bikini; she was rubbing her bikini bottom. There's a bit of a difference.
Yes. Yeah. No, it was really, you know, risque, admittedly. But you know, I never found the Divas swimsuit stuff. It was sexy, but I never thought it was pornographic. You know, I never thought it was. I never thought it was tasteless. Some of the angles they did, you know, the wrestling in the mud and the pole match, and, you know, the bra and panties match. Those could have been seen as lewd.
There's a lot of pudding and Jello and mud that a lot of us have. I was going to say a lot of us have blocked out. It's not that we blocked it out. It's that it was a 3-minute segment, so it wasn't an important part of the show.
Yeah.
You know, it happened a lot. Every now and then I will talk about a different moment that happened in women's wrestling on WWE programming. There's a lot.
Yeah. So I think that there should be, like I said, I'm glad that, yes, women have rightfully been recognized and transitioned to being seen seriously as wrestlers, but I think that there could be a better balance between embracing more of that you know, traditional femininity and being sexy. There's nothing wrong with that, I don't think.
I guess it wasn't going to be on the card that we were going to talk about, but since it does tie into this, you know, how women are used on the show, the whole purpose of Christian versus Chris Jericho was over who had the bigger crush on Trish Stratus. So I mean,
that was the storyline, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, like, this is one of those things where it's like, yeah, at least it gets them on TV, but the trade-off is that her value, and Trish Stratus, again, even at this point, is a good, capable wrestler. Her purpose is being the title belt, right? She's the prize to be won.
That's right.
So
that's a great point.
So there is a line that has to be done, and you got to consider who consents to it and who doesn't. Because, I mean, we're, especially with the Vince McMahon allegations, we've even been hearing about Maria Kanellis and Tori Wilson being instructed to do things that they did not want to do at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I mean, it's a much bigger conversation than just WrestleMania on its own. Christian won that match, by the way, because Trish turned heel on Jericho.
And so, you know, you're right that it says a lot, I think, about how women were appreciated. That Molly Holly had to offer her hair just to be on the show.
Right.
The 20th anniversary of WrestleMania. And, you know, and Vince said, okay. And even then, how long was that match? 6-7 minutes at most?
4:52. I've got it all pulled up.
Wow. So there you go. I mean...
Yeah. It wasn't the shortest match on the show.
Well, they're okay. I guess that's something, too.
Not when I give you this tidbit. The shortest match on the show was Tori and Sable against Jackie and Stacy.
Oh, yes.
So the two shortest matches were the women's matches. They combined for 7 minutes and 25 seconds.
I guess it was better than WrestleMania 19. They had the Miller Lite Catfight Girls.
Oh, God. Well, at least that's their job. They are... The Miller Lite Catfight Girls are models who promote beer. I'd say it's better than HLA.
The ingenious mind of Eric Bischoff.
And, you know, we can't. That's one of those things where we got to know that was actually a Bischoff idea. And I'm certain it was because, again, he had an extensive history and background in television. And Eric Bischoff was also responsible for WWE's participation with Girls Gone Wild. Like, this was him setting up the deal. The whole pay-per-view exists because of Eric Bischoff. It wasn't just on-screen figurehead talk. Like, that was what he did, because sex sells.
Oh, absolutely.
That pay-per-view I will talk about at some point, though, on the channel, and no, I don't have positive things to say about it yet. Yes, is there anything other than the main event that you wanted to talk about or bring up?
I don't think so. I mean, like you said, the other matches weren't that noteworthy, right?
The only thing that really stuck with me was, again, and this is the Madison Square Garden effect, the WrestleMania effect, just like Molly Holly, Ultimo Dragon signed with the company with one sole purpose. He wanted to wrestle at MSG. And in the end, not only was it kind of uneventful, the poor guy botches his entrance. Slips and falls because he's not used to basically walking on a TV screen. All that was, it was really a clinic for Rey Mysterio while putting a title onto Chavo.
And, of course, the big main event.
Yeah, the reason for the season.
That's right. And, I'm going to say, Jim, regardless of what happened with Chris Benoit, which we will talk about, I think this is one of the great WrestleMania main event, one of the greatest WrestleMania main events ever.
Not only do I agree, I feel like it was the blueprint for the perfect triple threat match. Because for the longest time, a triple threat match, wrestlers weren't used to working that sort of way, because you'd have to convey messages to two other people instead of one. So a lot of triple threat matches, at least up to that time, one person gets thrown out of the ring while the other two work. And then when that person comes back in, they throw one of the others out, so those two can work.
Yeah.
Yeah, the main event, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Chris Benoit. Triple H and Shawn Michaels, let's face it, Raw was their show. And it would continue to be their show pretty much for the rest of the year. Because Shawn Michaels was never supposed to return, right? So this was a big deal having him back.
And in fact, since he made this one-off appearance, or it was believed to be a one-off appearance at SummerSlam 2002, and then it turned into a full-time.
Yeah.
That's right, and it turned into a full-time run. And of course, he had one of the great rivalries with Triple H in the Ruthless Aggression era, a rivalry that lasted, 2 years, a good 2 years.
Yeah. Hell, even when they were on the same page, they weren't on the same page. They were in triple threats. Like, they had a triple threat with John Cena as well a couple years later.
Yeah.
And that was the one with the amazing spot where the two DX members are standing side by side, got John Cena pinned in the corner, and Shawn Michaels just kicks Triple H's head off. And everybody jaw on the floor, because no one expected that early in the match. You always, when it's a 2-on-1 scenario in a triple threat, always have to wait for a miscommunication, for dissension in the ranks. That one, Shawn Michaels was like, nah, you're out now. It was so good. Yeah. You see, I just kicked Stan.
Shawn Michaels is Mr. WrestleMania, right?
That's right.
And so it's appropriate for him to be in the main event of WrestleMania 20. And of course, at WrestleMania 10, he had that great ladder match with Razor Ramon.
That's right.
Shawn Michaels
was this his first Mania main event since 14?
Well, yeah, he faced Jericho at 19, but that wasn't the main event.
That wasn't the main event.
Yeah, so yes, it would be.
Yeah.
It would be.
What a return.
So the last time he had appeared in the main event of WrestleMania was 1998. And of course, loses
14.
to Austin. And, the meteoric rise of Stone Cold. So Triple H and Shawn Michaels in the main event of WrestleMania 20, that's expected. And, obviously these two put on a great show. So where does Chris Benoit fit in, the Rabid Wolverine? I guess we should start by saying is, we're all aware of the tragedy of Chris Benoit and his crimes. And,
and people will comment arguing with us on this and trying to say there was no suicide note, there was no evidence. Yes, there was. You're just not looking. Like, police made that stuff public. It is open and shut.
No, there's no denying what happened in 2007, and we're going to be talking about this, coming up, and it still hurts. It still hurts.
Absolutely. He grew up in our hometown. He was a local hero.
Disclaimer: Jim and I are from Edmonton.
Yeah.
Which
that's not a surprise for a lot of people.
Okay, well, in case they didn't know, and Chris Benoit was born in Montreal, but he grew up in Edmonton. In fact, actually, he went to high school with my mom, and the same high school that I attended also. So, Edmonton was a part of the Chris Benoit story, and as Edmonton wrestling fans, of course, naturally, Chris Benoit was very special to
that
him.
was a big reason why he was embraced, especially, when he jumped with the rest of the Radicals, because whenever we hear about wrestling in Alberta, it's Calgary, Hart Family, Calgary, Dungeon, Calgary, Hart Family. Edmonton had our own. We had our own star.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, Calgary gets the most attention because of the Hearts, because of Stampede Wrestling. But to have not only a wrestler from Edmonton, but, I mean, such a talent, Chris Benoit, regardless of what he did, still remains to me one of the greatest technical wrestlers ever.
Undeniable.
And, obviously he would be honored, and he should be rightfully honored if his crimes had not occurred.
Yeah, and there are people constantly, it still happens to this day on videos I've made in 2020, who will state in their comments, in public, with their names attached, that what he did should not matter, we should be celebrating his work. I feel the opposite. What you did as a job does not matter once you have ended someone's life. That supersedes it.
Yeah, and you know what? That's interesting, because I feel that if he had solely committed suicide, this, would have been tragic in its own right, but we would have been honoring him.
That's right.
The moment he kills Nancy Benoit and his son Daniel, that changes the story. He's a murderer. Right?
It's one thing, like, he's committed murder. He murdered his wife. He murdered his wife, who was someone in this business as well. But something that we need to acknowledge the egregiousness. He killed a 7-year-old boy. He killed a child. So no, if you were a really good mechanic but you killed a toddler, we're not going to celebrate how good of a mechanic you were. You're a child killer.
Absolutely. And, comparisons have been made to O.J. Simpson. His records as in the NFL stand. Yeah. And he's still, I mean, you can't deny that he is one of the greatest football players in the history of that sport. No, but he also killed 2 people.
Exactly.
Right. And so I think that's the same for Chris Benoit. You can't deny what he did in the ring, because that stands. And he was a great wrestler, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. Yeah. There was nothing wrong with saying that Chris Benoit was one of the greatest of all time, while also acknowledging that he committed acts of evil.
Yeah.
And because of that, he cannot be recognized.
He's not eligible.
And
I'm still, and I think you've seen the same pushback that I have on this when people try to make this comparison with OJ, but OJ's still in the Hall of Fame. OJ did not kill those people before being inducted in the Hall of Fame. He was in the Hall of Fame first. The argument was whether or not he should be removed. And I'm someone who does believe, when you've committed that severe of a crime, you should be removed from a Hall of Fame. So Jimmy Snuka, Tammy Sitch, they should be out of the Hall of Fame. And they should.
What about the president who shall not be named?
If we find out he's killed somebody, there will still be 20 million people saying, well, he was self-defense. They deserved it. You're just a hater, libtard. At least people are acknowledging it's a cult now. Like, even his supporters are acknowledging that it's not rational.
And the Republican Party, I mean, it has transformed into that, right?
It's scary. And I don't want to get too much into this because people, can you just stick to what you're supposed to talk about? But it's.
Well, okay, let's
fandom,
leave it then.
There are things that are more important than fandom. That's where I want to stick. Like, that's the point. I mean, you can like somebody's music, you can like a TV show they were on, but that doesn't mean they were a good person just because you enjoyed the product they put out. Because being a good person and being a good worker are not the same thing.
But to further add to the layer of tragedy is that, and this doesn't absolve Chris Benoit from his crimes, but it's become clear now that that wasn't Chris Benoit who committed those crimes. That was a man who was so severely mentally impaired that it wasn't the same person. You know, and again, I'm not sitting here. I want to make
the thing
that
is, there
clear.
are people that use that in his defense, and
No,
unfortunately,
I don't want to be one of those.
Yeah, I sound callous in saying this, but it doesn't matter because those people are not all of a sudden not dead, right? It doesn't bring them back.
I'm just solely saying that, you know, Chris Benoit was not of let's
not
say,
of sane
for
mind.
instance,
Yeah.
let's say this: if Chris Benoit had committed the murders but did not commit suicide, you know, I really wonder if at trial he would have been declared competent. Because as we have known through the work of Chris Nowinski and other neurologists, Chris Benoit's brain was absolutely destroyed, coupled with his severe depression after the death of Eddie Guerrero.
Yeah.
He wasn't there.
Though I'm not sure that would have been a benefit to him at the time, because most of this research, most of these findings did take place afterwards. And in the case of Chris Nowinski and the CTE research, you can't really check until after they're dead in the first place.
That's right. You have to see the brain, yeah.
Yeah. So you can't really, you can't use it as a defense while you're alive.
Let's go back to 2004. And we already talked about Eddie Guerrero, earlier on, in terms of being the small guy who was never seriously considered to be champion.
Right.
Chris Benoit is, again, one of those guys, 5'10", 5'11", right? One of the great workers in the ring, one of the most intense wrestlers, but still was never seriously given the attention that he deserved.
Because
so 2004,
even compared to Eddie Guerrero, he was missing a tool. Because he did not have the mic skills and the ability to get a crowd behind him with speech. Because he had intensity, he could cut a fierce promo, but that doesn't necessarily get people to relate to you.
And so they got around that basically by building this underdog story.
Yeah.
Well,
really what they did was they built Triple H and Shawn Michaels as the story, and then added him as the underdog. So just like with Kane having to do it without his opponent and build the story, they kind of had to build it. I mean, he was there, but they had to utilize his strengths and hide his weaknesses. So they put two of the best talkers in the game against him so that they could carry that part.
In fact, you're right, Jim, because really, Shawn and Triple H, they had a rivalry.
Yeah.
Chris Benoit didn't have a rivalry. He was the number one contender. That's why he was there.
He just said, I want big gold. That's what he wanted.
Yeah. So he didn't, whereas Shawn and Triple H had a feud going on, right? So that was the story. But regardless.
Which, on a side note, and this bugs me, maybe I'm too, kayfabe might be dead for me with my suspension of disbelief. If you have a contract that says Triple H versus Chris Benoit, it does not matter that Shawn Michaels walks in, kicks people, and signs the contract. That doesn't mean you're in.
Yeah, and they've done that a few times, haven't they?
Yeah, they have.
Yeah,
but it's like that's not how it works in the legal world.
The Hogan and McMahon contract signing for Mania 19, and he makes Hogan sign in his own blood.
Yeah,
that's not legally binding.
No, that's just it. But it's one of those in what universe will it work? Oh yeah, the WWE universe.
That's right. Well. Yeah, and really, watching professional wrestling requires a lot of that suspension of disbelief many times. But,
sometimes it's a bit much.
But seeing Chris Benoit win the Royal Rumble in 2004, number one entrant, and then eliminating the last person he eliminates is the Big Show in a very creative elimination, I have to say.
Although it's been done several times since, that was unique at the time.
Yeah, and to win it from the number one, to win the Royal Rumble from the number one position also was not done too often.
No. At that point in time, I believe before him was just Shawn Michaels.
Was it just Shawn? Really?
I think it was just Shawn. Then after Benoit it happened, it became a little bit more common.
It's happened a little more frequently. Yeah, but again, so we have to, again, think about this as the perspective of we're watching in 2004. So we're two Edmonton fans, but even if you're not from Edmonton, you know, as you said, like Eddie endeared himself, Chris Benoit endeared himself because people had watched him over the years, and he continuously proved himself as one of the greats. And it was time. It was time for him to be the champion.
Wrestling is, I'm going with so many cliches. It's a working man's product. Mm-hmm. And people wanted to see somebody succeed based on actually being really good at their job instead of because of some screwy finish or because of nepotism. Like, we wanted to see the hard worker succeed for once. You know, and that was basically how he was getting the fan support, is because he was putting in the work and wrestling really well.
Yeah, and wrestling really well, yeah. And I think adding to the story was that the championship that he would win was not the WWE Championship, which is, you know, maybe
still the most prestigious belt on the planet, yeah.
Yeah.
Except maybe the CMLL, their belt should be the most prestigious. It's the oldest one.
Right. So the fact that he was competing for and would go on to win not the WWE Championship but the World Heavyweight Championship, you know, the big gold belt.
Even though he already won the WCW version.
Right.
But he never got to really
be champion.
Yeah. He offered. I didn't mention it when I did talk about him walking out. He offered to drop that title the next day, and he was told to go home.
Is that right?
Yeah. So they basically kicked him out. Leave the belt on the desk, go home. So he didn't have that opportunity to, be the champ. He just beat Sid and then was out of the company.
No, it was uneventful. I mean, many people didn't even really realize that he had been champion.
That's just, that's a big one.
You know.
Because again, there's really no footage of it. It's not like there was a backstage segment with him talking with Bischoff and handing the title over. Like, that didn't happen.
Even the commentary, you know, the build-up to the match was really that Chris had never won. And the moment that he wins the title, Triple H taps out, and what does Jim Ross say? You know, vintage, classic, passionate Jim Ross. Chris Benoit's 18-year odyssey has culminated by winning the World's Heavyweight Championship. It was right for Chris to win that title. Again, this is before the tragedy and the match itself. Let's talk about the match itself.
Oh,
like you said, it was a phenomenal triple threat match.
Yeah. See, I attended WrestleMania 30. Of course, the main event of that was Orton, Batista, and Bryan. And there were so many comparisons to the WrestleMania 20 triple threat, not just because they were both a triple threat, but also because of a lot of similar spots, because essentially the WWE had their opportunity to replace that moment, that WrestleMania moment from 20, with a new one from 30. They even resorted to the two blood rivals taking out the one everybody wants to see.
Right, Orton and Batista, yeah.
Although I felt that 20 actually, had them wrestle, whereas through 30, Bryan had a very hefty nap when he was supposedly taken out by Orton and Batista on the announce table. So I felt that 20 did a superior version of it, but there was so many unique moments. The biggest one that stuck with me at one point, because, and this is a fun fact here, prior to Chris Benoit at WrestleMania 20, at no opportunity in the main event of Mania or for a world title match at Mania was a match decided by submission. Benoit was the first.
Wow, really? I didn't know that.
So with that match, the thing that stuck with me most was Benoit when he had, at that point, I think about it, Shawn Michaels in the crossface. And Shawn was so close to tapping, he'd been bleeding for about 15 minutes at this point, and Triple H from the floor slides into the ring and grabs Shawn's hand so that he can't hit the canvas.
Preventing him from submitting.
Preventing him from submitting. That was so different. You'd never see again. Like I'm stopping my rival from losing, so I don't lose too.
Well, and that's the uniqueness of triple threat matches is that champions don't have to be pinned.
Yeah,
they don't have to lose, right?
And normally that's the cop out that I can't stand with multi-man matches. Thankfully, in this one, the champ was the one who definitively lost because Triple H was the one who tapped.
Yeah, and it had just we talked about Shawn Michaels coming back, and again, he showcases why he's Mr. WrestleMania. He does a number of great spots and the backflip from the top rope. All three of these guys were at the top of their game here, right? And it's a WrestleMania
both Triple H and
style.
Shawn really knew how to take an Irish whip and end up on the floor.
Yeah,
I liked Triple H's better. Because Shawn would use the turnbuckle, Triple H would actually basically backflip over the top rope. And he actually did this in this match. Where he got Irish whipped so hard he went straight to the ground.
And, this ties back to something that we were talking about at the very beginning of this, this talk. This was a great match, and it was a great match because of the wrestling involved, the storytelling involved, the work that these three guys put into it. Does it really matter how many people they performed in front of?
Yeah, not one bit. Well, I mean, unless, it was like 400 people, then maybe.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, we're talking... there has to be a sizable crowd, but there doesn't have to be an enormous, ridiculous, extreme crowd, right?
Don't forget, most of TNA's biggest moments happened in the Impact Zone in front of maybe 600 people. Mm-hmm. Right?
No, exactly, and so not to rehash what we talked about. This was a great match, and
good.
It was emotional. Let's just be honest. As I said, JR's call. Chris is genuinely weeping. There's the confetti. He's in the world's most famous arena, and then we talked about him earlier.
His best
Eddie Guerrero. So Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit were genuine. Were actually the best of friends.
I feel like best friend is not selling it enough. And if you've ever seen Dark Side of the Ring, it's like this was a soulmate kind of thing. Neither of their lives would have gotten to where they were if they didn't have the other person with them. And you want to talk about the degradation of Chris Benoit, about him not being himself? When Eddie died, Benoit was never Chris Benoit again.
Mm-hmm. Actually, it has been said that he died that day as well. Chris died the day that Eddie died. And so when you look at that moment, and you have to consider everything. It's not just that moment of these two men hugging. It's their history. These are, again, as we've said, these are two men who were never in that spot before, and were never given a chance to seriously be the top guy. And here they are, both of them, in the largest wrestling company in the world, and they're both world champions. And they're in the world's most famous arena. It's New York City. It's WrestleMania 20. They're hugging. They're crying. There's the confetti. That is such it's a beautiful moment.
Yeah, and this
is a beautiful moment.
Unfortunately, this is why I have so much more resentment towards Chris Benoit, because the actions of that one man in June of 2007, he didn't just destroy Nancy's legacy, because her career can never be acknowledged without bringing up what he did. But he destroyed probably the most beautiful moment in Eddie's career, because it can never be shown. Yeah. In
fact, actually, Jim, that's an excellent point. First and foremost, the victims are Daniel and Nancy.
Yeah.
But I will also say that there were other casualties.
Yeah. Jericho and Kurt Angle have both brought up that their best moments. Jericho, I believe, was Royal Rumble 2001. I can't remember which match it was with Kurt Angle, but I'm betting it was probably like an Ultimate Submission match.
They had a ladder match, did they not?
Jericho, he and Jericho did.
Yeah.
And that was one of those ones where Benoit took a headshot so hard that you now that you know what you know, you go, oh, that's not okay.
Even now, if you watch any Chris Benoit match, you cringe when you see the diving headbutt, right?
Yeah.
When you know that his brain was so damaged because of spots like that.
Yeah.
But
those matches, the Backlash 2004 Triple Threat, these matches Orton, when Randy Orton became the youngest World Heavyweight Champion in history, it's like
that
none of
moment
these
is ruined for him too.
Yeah, none of these matches can be played back. They can't be highlighted. They can be briefly mentioned.
Even Royal Rumble 04, that match is very heavily glossed over when they recap Royal Rumbles of the past.
And that was at least in my personal opinion, was one of the best Rumble matches of all time.
Yeah. And of course, when they do the by the numbers, they cannot say that Chris Benoit won from the number one entry. He don't say his name. Since Vince McMahon made a statement the day after the Chris Benoit Memorial Show that apart from my words tonight, we will not speak the name of Chris Benoit again, and they haven't.
That's right.
He's been effectively scrubbed.
I'm glad that they went back on one part, because they were erasing him from the WWE Network for a chunk of time. Mm-hmm. Or in places where he was, say, in a tag team match, so he had to be in there, they would mute the commentary whenever they're talking about him. They've undone that. But at the same time, there is no reason to ever mention him as part of new content ever again.
Yeah. In fact, I was surprised. I bought a WWE Encyclopedia a few years ago, and they included him. They actually included him, which I was very surprised. But it only goes up until WrestleMania 20.
Mm.
Also, if any of our listeners, if you have the Chris Benoit Hard Knocks DVD, I'm sure that's a very valuable item, I would assume.
Oh, yeah. Well, back in 2014, for WrestleMania, I was part of a different YouTube channel. We had a Fund My Mania campaign so that we could afford to go to New Orleans and have this week-long trip. And I was selling a lot of my DVDs. Hard Knocks was, even in 2014, going for 3 digits. It was and I didn't have that one. The guy that I went to Mania with, he did, and he sold his, and I think he got about $200 for it.
Wow.
So,
I never had that one. I do have Backlash 2004. I wonder how much that would be. Interesting, but I don't plan on getting rid of it. So
yeah, there's a lot of DVDs that I sold that I wish I still have, that I wish I still held on to, including WrestleMania 20.
Yeah, the fact is that there were many casualties involved in the Chris Benoit tragedy. Obviously, above all, we cannot overstate this, was Daniel and Nancy.
Yeah.
But there were other deaths, if you will, and the wrestling industry itself really took a hit in the summer of 2007. There's really a lot of negative publicity that did. You were ashamed to be a wrestling fan. Going back to we're from Edmonton. Our hero, and really one of the only famous wrestlers from Edmonton, and now all of a sudden he's this murderer. It hurts. It's damaging. It's still nearly 20 years later. I mean, it's. They say that time heals all wounds. I mean, I think, yes, we have healed in a sense, but you never forget. You will never forget.
And the thing is, when it's people judging from outside the fandom, there's nothing that you're going to say to convince, because the accusation is that we support that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, the finale of WrestleMania 20, I mean, regardless of what happened, I mean, it is soured, but regardless of what happened with Chris in 2007, that it remains to me one of the best WrestleMania moments, one of the most genuinely emotional. And the fact, because they're both dead, Eddie a little over a year and a half later, and obviously Chris in 2007, and the nature of Chris's death in particular. And you do see in the audience Nancy and Daniel and his other son, who has had a really tough time.
David, he's still in Edmonton. He's come up in conversation a lot. He actually signed a PR stunt contract with the company that I helped form, RCW. He has never shown up once for training, has never done anything other than produce a headline for news sheets. Lance Storm offered to train him. He never showed up. So, I mean, it's one of those things where he's got to make up his mind. Because at one point he was even saying in interviews, this is before he was interviewed for Dark Side of the Ring, that he wanted to wrestle as Chris Benoit Jr., and he said that he had made tights that were the Wolverine style. Like, he wanted to go the full 9 on that. But of course, Dark Side of the Ring, we finally saw him start to process some of this. Because he was in denial for over a decade.
Yeah, I see again, and that's another casualty, right, of this tragedy. The wrestling business was really, really hit hard. Fans were hit hard. Special moments like WrestleMania were hit hard. I mean, that's just the tip of it, really.
Yeah.
The Chris Benoit murders were far-reaching.
Absolutely. And you know, there's full well, there's always wrestlers who get into the business and say, this man was my inspiration, this is why I got into it. You know full well there are people who wanted to get into wrestling, and Benoit was the reason they ditched the dream. So who knows what we may have missed out on. You know, this was something that was a lot larger than that household.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and again, going back to the Chris Benoit legacy, it's unfortunate. Another casualty is Chris Benoit gave his life for this business, but because of decisions that he made, you know, whether he was impaired or not, he cannot be recognized by the industry that he loved and that he gave so much to.
That's right. He wasn't in the WWE one because there are still people commenting on my stuff incorrectly that the WWE erased Benoit from the Hall of Fame, and I should acknowledge that.
He was never there.
He was never in the Hall of Fame to be erased from it. He was in the Wrestling Hall of Fame in Texas, and he was...
Wrestling Observer, right?
Yeah, and he was removed from that one. And he was in the Wrestling Observer, and there was an actual physical Wrestling Hall of Fame that got destroyed in a storm a couple of years ago. But that one, Benoit was in that one. I don't know if he was. I imagine he would have been in Cauliflower Alley Club.
Well, and again, he's in all of these, and he would have been in the WWE Hall of Fame because he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, but he can't be.
No, yeah, exactly it.
So,
his work absolutely justified it, but his actions are why he absolutely could never do it.
I mean, you look at Eddie Guerrero, 4 months after he died, and he was inducted. You know, and I would expect this year, I would fully expect Bray Wyatt to be inducted, right? And if Chris had committed suicide and not killed anybody, I'm sure he would have been inducted almost immediately, you know.
If it wasn't immediately, it would have been because of the suicide itself. But within 2 years, he absolutely would have been.
Yeah, and obviously it can't be. And that's why I find the Chris Benoit Memorial Show fascinating, because you got to see people's genuine reactions to Chris before knowledge of his crimes, you know, and so that was a genuine tribute show where people rightfully paid tribute to the man, to the athlete that they knew, and it was only after that we found out the nature of his crimes. But, you know, Chris Benoit, the wrestler, deserves recognition, but the question is, can we separate the wrestler and the man? And
here's the thing, and I don't think you can.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where we got to acknowledge again, the WWE Hall of Fame is not a real Hall of Fame. It is a moneymaker. It is a show. It is a publicity thing. You are not going to make money. You are not going to sell tickets, and you are going to lose a ton of sponsors putting in somebody who had all but confirmed to have committed murder of his wife and child.
And yet there's a few of those, as you mentioned already, you know, Jimmy Snuka and Sonny and Donald Trump. I mean, he's an insurrectionist.
In those cases, well, Sonny did it afterwards. And Snuka, it wasn't really... I mean, everybody knew. It was underground rumbling, but it wasn't until Snuka put out his autobiography that the case opened back up and it became a public, like a greater mainstream issue. He was already in the Hall of Fame. So that's where the O.J. Simpson situation comes in. It's like he's already in it.
Right.
but Benoit was not already in it. And it's definitely like putting a night together and selling tickets to celebrate someone who in the past killed somebody. It's not good business. It's not good PR.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, you made a video which I really enjoyed. You said that should Nancy Benoit, woman, should she be in the Hall of Fame? Yes. However, she's tied to Benoit. She can't. Again, another casualty. Her legacy, her memory cannot be fully commemorated because of this. So no, there is the many layered casualties to the Chris Benoit tragedy, and so going back to WrestleMania 20, what I still consider, regardless of what happened, I still think it's one of the greatest emotional finales of a WrestleMania. But you look at it now with deep regret. It's emotion now. It's emotional for another reason. Now it's a bitter emotion.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, well, that being said...
Don't you wish now people thought more about the Playboy evening gown match? A positive impact from Eddie and Chris Benoit passing away. Eddie resulted in the wellness policy. Benoit resulted in the wellness policy being enforced. And Benoit resulted in Signature Pharmacy getting shut down. Because we didn't even mention, when it comes to the victims of this whole thing, a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people had to completely change their careers and change their styles in order to stay in their careers. Ken Anderson made a damn fool of himself over the whole Signature Pharmacy thing, saying he didn't take steroids, and he was one of the people on the list. And there were people like Rey Mysterio and Randy Orton and like these people who were on that list, and Chris Masters, and people who had to make a quick change if they were going to still be here. There can be, it's the whole, every cloud has a silver lining. It was an awful tragedy, but it may have saved more lives. Like, I'm not saying you should get credit for saving more lives, but because of his actions, a lot of fail-safes have come up and been enforced and taken seriously to make sure that we never have to hear about this sort of thing happening again.
Well, no, you're right, Joe. I mean, anytime there's an evil action, there's always good that comes. That's the way it is, and that's the way you have to look at it, I suppose.
Because if you don't have hope, it's really hard to get out of bed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who thought that was going to be like the final note about WrestleMania 20? It was such a great show, and now we're talking about death and tragedy.
Yeah. Oof. Well, it inevitably was going to be, right? We knew.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was inescapable. But yeah, I guess for any listeners who stuck around through this entire thing, you gotta let us know your favorite matches with WrestleMania 20, the moments that stuck with you, and. No, I'm not going to ask the Benoit. I'm not going to ask the Benoit question. That's a can of worms. But here's just for the sake of a happier note: if the internet didn't have the role it did, how do you think Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar would have gone down?
Well, I think it would have been rightfully anticipated. These were, like I said, on paper, it's a good match.
Yeah,
Goldberg
and I think
Brock
if they got to do what they were planning to do, it would have been a good match. But again, like they could not stick to their script because of the fan reaction, and they could not think of anything on the fly because of the crowd reaction.
Yeah. No, I think it would have been actually a pretty decent match, quite frankly. But and that in 2004, it's not the early days of the internet, but it certainly wasn't. It was still before YouTube.
Yeah, and that is fair.
It's still infancy of Facebook and social media. So, yeah, the internet existed in 2004, but it wasn't what it is today. Obviously, that was 20 years ago. But
it was still prominent in the wrestling community. Like, for the diehards, they had the internet. Casuals, not so much. But based on WWE's numbers, that was 20,000 people that all knew what was going on.
Yeah, and so for that spoiled it, right? But
100%.
Other than that, I think that would have been a good match. Overall, I would say WrestleMania 20 is an important show for many reasons, and we've touched on some of those.
Yeah.
I think overall, I think it's a good show. I think it's a good WrestleMania.
Its replay value is high. It is totally still watchable and holds up today.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And so going back to how we started this discussion about the nostalgia and a lot of my wrestling viewing, as I told you, Jim, is fueled by nostalgia. And so to talk about WrestleMania 20 today with you, just a real pleasure, honestly. I really, really enjoyed talking about something with someone who is as equally passionate and knowledgeable. So I want to thank you for the work that you're doing on your channel here and for talking to me today.
Of course, back at you, my friend. It's always a pleasure. It's a shame that there aren't many wrestling-related or content-related things where our people can find you here. But for those who speak Italian and do have access to, say, TuneIn Radio or iHeart, you can find Michael Vecchio in his element. Let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm one of the co-hosts of Ciao Italia Edmonton. It's a radio program. It is Italian, like Jim said, but if you don't understand the language, still tune in and listen to the great Italian music that we play, because I think Italian music needs to be heard by as many people as possible. And that's on Connect FM, which you can listen to the show on our Connect FM Canada app or on connectfm.ca. And so, yes, you can hear me there. Additionally, I do write. I'm a writer for the History Guild, which covers all periods of history from the ancient world to modern warfare. And I'm a frequent contributor and editor for the History Guild. So historyguild.org, and you can find some of my work there. And again, thanks, Jim. I just love being able to talk with someone who loves this wacky industry as much as you do.
Well, it's always fun being in the land of misfit toys. So yeah, for everybody who tuned in, thank you so much. Of course, I guess it's time Michael and I both get our shoulders off the mat. So until next time.